Okay, 1 o'clock. I have to wait for the clock to tick over. I would like to call to order today's meeting of State of Nevada Executive Branch Audit Committee for Tuesday, June 29th, 2021 at 1 p.m. to order. If I could ask the clerk to take the roll, please.
Thank you, Governor. Lieutenant Governor Marshall?
Here.
Secretary of State Zagowski?
Yes, I'm here.
Treasurer Clonine?
Here.
Controller Byrne? General Ford?
Here.
Ms. DeLong? Thank you, Governor. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 2, public comment. This is the first time set aside for public comment. Anyone wishing to address the board on any item on today's agenda, please step forward, identify yourself for the record, and comments will be limited to 3 minutes. I'll start with Carson City. Do we have anyone in Carson City wishing to speak during public comment? A lot of people. Nobody wants to speak during public comment? Going once, going twice. Okay, do we have any in Las Vegas for public comment?
Anybody here?
No. Okay. We will close item number 2, public comment. Move on to item number 3, approval of the January 20th, 2021 minutes.
Move for approval. Barbara Zagowski.
We have a motion for approval on the minutes. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing and seeing none. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion passes. Item number 4, presentation of audit reports pursuant to NRS 353A.085. These are for information only.
Good afternoon, Governor, members of the committee. For the record, Ashwini Prasad. Representing the Division of Forestry is State Forester Fire Warden Casey Casey. And representing the Department of Corrections, Director Charles Daniels and his management team. At the request of the Executive Branch Audit Committee, we reviewed Nevada Division of Forestry's, or NDF's, overtime. For our first objective was to validate NDF's updated overtime policies and procedures, and our second objective was to assess the impact of NDF's overtime from the closure of Ely Conservation Camp. NDF's access to Nevada Department of Corrections, or NDOC's inmate labor is essential to controlling firefighting costs and mitigating fire risks throughout the state. NDF's successful overtime monitoring has resulted in improved performance, however, was blunted with the closure of the Ely Conservation Camp in July 2020. We made 2 recommendations supporting the 2 objectives. For our first objective, we recommend continuing successful overtime monitoring to help control NDF's personnel costs. State Forester Fire Warden Casey reviewed policies and procedures in a proactive effort to improve overtime in response to DIA's audit of NDOC. NDF updated policies and procedures on overtime and standby pay in January 2020. As a result, NDF has seen a 32% decrease in overtime since fiscal year 2019. With the closure of Ely Conservation Camp in July 2020, higher cost NDF camp crew supervisors are being used in firefighting roles in place of NDOC inmates and will increase overtime costs in fiscal year 2021. For our second objective, we recommend coordinating with NDOC to re-establish an inmate workforce in Eastern Nevada. Coordinating with NDOC, NDF could provide vital wildland fire suppression activities and reduce the risk for potential loss of life, damages, and costs from a fire. With the closure of the Ely Conservation Camp and loss of the inmate workforce in fiscal years 2020 and 2021, NDF was unable to respond to 11 fires and unable to complete 14 fuel reduction and fire suppression missions normally performed during the year. This would have resulted in $2.2 million from federal cooperators, local jurisdictions, and other entities. Without the Ely Conservation Camp inmate workforce, NDF is limited in providing cost-efficient wildfire management for the state. The increased risk is valued at $1.7 million for the second half of fiscal year 2021 for fires not responded to and suppression missions not completed. Moreover, some inmates lose the opportunity to benefit from valuable life skills to help them transition back to society and earn a wage, in part, to make victims restitution payments, as well as have an opportunity to shorten their sentence. Studies show rehabilitating inmates and providing life skills experience, such as firefighting, lower recidivism rates by 10%. We appreciate the Division of Forestry and the Department of Corrections assistance throughout our audit and thank them for their time. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the board on, or the committee on the Conservation and Natural Resources Forestry Audit?
This is Barbara Sagaski. I do, Governor.
Okay, go ahead, Secretary.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And thank you very much for the report. I understand it was very trying times during the COVID also. I'm very supportive of the inmates working and learning skills. I think that is very important. And I want to thank them for everything that they're doing and the life skills they're learning. Nobody mentioned there used to be a program that we used youth, college kids, high school. Do we do that anymore? Is there any appetite for that at all? Do we help enforce so that our students and our kids know what we're doing or what's going on along the fire lines?
Who wants to take that one?
I'll take that. Governor, thank you. Members of the committee, for the record, Casey, State Forester Fire Warden for the Division of Forestry. We do still have youth programs working with youth, both from very small ages for prevention and mitigation efforts. We also work with the youth training camps to try to teach them life skills as well. We don't utilize the youth training camps anymore in project work, but we are working with some of the programs around the state to get that back up and running. We are also trying to bring on an internship program where we could start bringing students in both from a high school and a college level to get them acquainted with this type of work and see if this is something that they would like to do. So we're definitely working with them from an educational standpoint. We are working on programs for work.
Thank you so much, Casey, for explaining that and going through that. I think the advantage I had was being in the legislature, and this was something that we had talked about at great lengths. So I just wanted to thank you for that. And Governor, I'd like to thank, out of the 8, 6 of your agencies responded and 2 did not. So I just wanted to put that on the record as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you, Governor. Kate Marshall for the record. First off, thank you for this and for your lovely presentation. It was very well done and very professional, so thank you very much. You and I talked about this and my concerns about this program overall. My basic concern is that I would really be interested if the audit division could do a second audit into alternative solutions or more comprehensive methods of dealing with firefighting. To say that we are at high risk right now in the West is an understatement. This weekend I walked some of the burn in Great Basin National Park to see that area. They are currently going home to home to help people identify defensible space because it is such a risk in eastern Nevada right now. But one of the issues that I see in this report is that you are paying inmates $2.23 a day to put their life at risk. Whether or not someone's incarcerated, that is a human life, and you're putting their life at risk for $2.23 a day. Other states, and this is what I would like a second audit to look into, in addition to early release, have looked into recruitment programs for post-incarcerated persons. The fact that someone has that training while they are incarcerated does not mean they can use that training once they have been released from incarceration due to the fact that they may not, under their parole, be allowed to leave the county. They may not be able to clear their record, and so therefore may not be able to work on a firefighting line because they have a record. They may not be able to get a license. There are things that we can do, expedited expungement, the ability to leave your county to work fire lines. In addition, it is my view that $2.23 a day is a form of enslavement. And we don't do that in this country. And so I would like us to look at other solutions, other pay solutions, and what other states are doing with respect to facilitating a robust firefighting force. I know we need the people, and I know we need the skills, and I know it's worth a heck of a lot more than $2.23 a day. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a response from either Casey or Director Daniels?
I'd be happy to respond,
Okay.
Governor. Thank you again for the record, Casey, State Forester, Fire Warden. I agree with you. I don't know where the $2.23 a day came from. Is it off?
No, it's on.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, it's in the document.
Oh, no, I know. Sorry. I'm not sure where it came from. When I became State Forester, we were paying $2.10 a day. Prior to that, it was $1 a day. For project work, we do pay more for firefighting forces. They get paid by the hour, 24 hours a day, so it's $24 a day for their time on fire. In addition to that time, they get time off their sentence, so we also pay, it's up to 15 credits off of their sentence, which can be up to, I think it's 30 or 45 days off their sentence. That's part of the reason we get people coming through this program, is that time off the sentence. So for good time worked. We agree that we need to look at the pay structure, and we have been looking at that. We've looked at other states and what they pay, and they're all over the board also. One of the things from a coming back to work perspective that we see here, a lot more of them get jobs coming out directly into tree care industry. So we are working with the Department of Corrections right now on certifying our program and making it one of the programs like some of their other programs that are certified that give you those courses, and then you leave with the certification. We did just hire a firefighter directly out of the camp here for a seasonal firefighting position within the division. It does happen. We've seen them move on to the BLM. We've actually, this is the second one we ourselves have hired. It's not a huge record going into fire because of the issues that you explained, but when they come, what we see more is that tree care, and so we're going to work on that side of the house and make sure that they have certifications and cool school courses, just like we do with our certified arborists, to kind of solidify that side of the program.
Thank you, I appreciate that, but I would still like to ask for a second audit to look at all the different options that you can bring your resources to, of how we can ensure that that kind of training and that kind of skill is A, properly paid for, and B, that people who have that skill and who are then paroled can actually get those jobs. And I know that it's not necessarily your wheelhouse to achieve all these things. And so I appreciate what you have done to date, and I thank you for that. So that's what I'm asking for. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Daniels, did you have anything to add?
It's a circle on the outside side.
Yes, Governor. Good afternoon. This is Director Daniels from the Nevada Department of Corrections. First of all, I really appreciate the comments. Not directly related, but I will share with you this. We are right now engaging in developing robust vocational training and educational programs for all of the inmates. I too agree that we could do a lot more, but even while we were dealing with COVID, we started with private-public partnerships. We're in the discussion phase in which we can ensure that these individuals that are in our care, we're not only addressing their issues, whether it be anger management, whether it be something, some mental health issues, but also in their ability that once they leave our custody, they're able to not only get a job, but a job with livable wages. And we know and recognize, based on some of our budgetary limitations, that that's going to be somewhat different. So we've decided to work with other entities to do such. And I think you will see that coming around the corner very quickly. And I'm excited to share that with the group. And these are our inmates, of course, but they're out on contract through other organizations. And then I would also like to just circle back around regarding the closure of Ely Camp and what has transpired with that. I can't dispute any of the data, but I can tell you this, every single one of those inmates were just transferred to another camp. And if they were fire certified, they've just responded out of those other camps, the closest camps to that facility. So the level of availability to those individuals that do fight fires never changed, not once. So I'm not really sure about the testimony that, well, you know, we lost those inmates. They were just reassigned. And just like if our inmates were to change where they're currently housed, and we move them to another part of the state, if they're fire certified, they just work on a crew at that other location. So I just wanted to bring a little clarity to that moment. And we have worked diligently with NDF on ensuring that we can help provide those services. So I just wanted to state that for the record.
Okay, I've got two follow-up questions from that. Your comments were, when you made the presentation, that the closure of the camp caused this. Now the director is saying it didn't cause it.
Governor, for the record, Warren Lohman, the audit looked at what were the activities that were occurring at the camp. We valued them. We looked at the number of fires, the amount of remediation work that was going on there, and then what of that work did not occur after the camp closed. So with respect to the director's assertion that the inmates were put in other camps and other work was done, we would agree with that, but there was an amount of work that was unable to be completed that we've outlined in the audit report.
Okay, thank you. And then Director, is there a maximum amount of good time credit that the inmate can have taken off their sentence for fighting fires?
Hi, this is Director Daniels, Nevada Department of Corrections. There's a maximum amount of credit that we can give an inmate regarding any form of the collection of good time. We just add it all up, and they're entitled to a certain amount each year. And for the ones that are working on the fire crews, they typically would receive the maximum in conjunction with whatever else they could get, up to a maximum amount of time off. So if the maximum amount of time off is 70 days per year, then they would get that. 75 days, 60, that's what they would be entitled to. And that time does count, and we highly value their work. And I'm not aware of any circumstances in which they would not receive the maximum credit for being a part of those work crews.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions on this audit?
Mr. Governor, Aaron Ford, if I could.
Yes, General Ford.
Thank you. I don't have to say much because frankly, Lieutenant Governor Marshall said it very well. And you've heard me say before, Governor, on the Board of Examiners, that I have concerns with programs like this that are reminiscent to me of convict leasing. And this minimum wage component that Lieutenant Governor Marshall was talking about is concerning. $2 and some odd cents an hour is offensive at some level. What I would be interested in understanding, though, is how do we calculate, how would we value the good time credit that these inmates are afforded if they were to be counted somehow or another, monetized, to see what that amounts to, right? I mean, I know we've for example, my office has defended a lawsuit on the forestry-based issues that related to payment of minimum wage and prevailed in that regard. I know that there was a bill that was proposed, Dina Neal proposed a bill last session that would have given inmates minimum wage. I forget, it didn't pass, but I don't know where it failed. The point is, these are dynamic issues that have been raised time and time and time again, and I don't think clearly the EBAC is the appropriate venue for us to be able to address these, but these are nonetheless concerns that have to be raised because we need to keep them at the forefront. I would hope that going forward, next legislative session, that we can do more than talk about this. Again, if we need to figure out a way to monetarily value the good time credit associated with this, then I'd like to know what that is, see what that amounts to from an hourly basis, right? I would also like to know if we need to make statutory changes to afford more good time credit for people who are putting their lives on the line for $2 a day. That's a problem for me, and it is offensive at some level. I know that, again, it doesn't necessarily touch on the purposes of the EBAC committee, but I want to take the opportunity to use this platform to, again, voice my displeasure with programs that appear to be similar to convict leasing. There wasn't. The final thing I'll say is that we did pass a resolution this year sponsored by the Black Caucus, specifically by, I forget the actual sponsor of the bill, that is outlined, that is removing slavery and indentured servitude from our state constitution. That passed unanimously. I testified in support of it, and we talked about convict leasing in that context. And so I would hope that, again, we're able to do more than talk about this and effectuate some real change on this issue to reflect what our standards are in this state.
Thank you for your comments. I agree. And Director Daniels, can you address General Ford's comments as it relates to how the good time credit is calculated, how they, if they all get it, is based on number of days, or how that's done?
Governor, I will allow James Jones, my acting deputy director. I'm sorry.
Governor, committee, this is James Jones for the record, acting deputy director of support services. I believe we could get that information to the committee. I don't have it here with me on how they're calculated. I could get with our offender management division and get you that information though.
That would be great. Thank you very much. Any further questions?
Governor, this is it.
Oh, Governor, I just wanted to reiterate that what I'm really asking for is a second audit that could bring back recommendations for how to manage the fact that we have these costs on wildlife and that shouldn't be put on incarcerated individuals to carry that cost like that.
Got it. I think Director Lohman understands that's necessary. Treasurer Conine, I think you said something?
Yes, Governor, thank you. Just a quick clarifying question, probably for NDOC. Is the cap on good time credit statutory, or is it a policy? Where does it come from?
This is Director Daniels, for the record. It's statutory.
Statutory, okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, moving on to, let's see here. Number B, Department of Agriculture, Grants Management.
Good afternoon, Governor and committee members. For the record, Heather Domenici, Audit Manager. Here to represent the Nevada Department of Agriculture are Director Jennifer Ott and Fiscal Administrator Katie Jamison. Our audit focused on NDA's fiscal processes with the objective of developing recommendations to improve oversight of federal grant programs. We found NDA did not timely spend $56.3 million in federal grant funds within award periods or allowed funds to expire unspent. Award amounts are based on prior period spending on meal reimbursement claims from Nevada counties. The consequences of untimely spending cascade to future periods in the same or greater amounts as previous years. Without improving grants management and fiscal processes, Nevada could lose access of up to $57.4 million annually in federal grant funds. We make the recommendation for NDA to improve grants management and fiscal processes to improve oversight of federal grant programs, which will help ensure Nevada maintains access to federal grant programs, grants are spent timely and within grant periods, federal program and accounting records adequately support expenditures, and grants management and fiscal activities align with NDA's strategic goals and agency initiatives. NDA did not timely spend $54.3 million in child nutrition program funding, or 96% of all unspent federal funds department-wide. Review of NDA grant documentation and state accounting records indicate NDA takes almost 2 years to fully spend and finalize a 1-year child nutrition federal grant award. Additionally, NDA grants management and fiscal processes do not ensure the integrity of federal program and fiscal records. NDA's records management practices are outdated, paper-based, decentralized, and not easily accessible to all personnel requiring access. Inadequate records management costs the state $404,000 in a cash shortfall and an additional $84,000 in forensic auditing services engaged to review the matter. The audit could not determine the cause of the shortfall. We recommend NDA improve grants management and fiscal processes by working with counties for more timely claims, aligning grants management and fiscal activities with NDA's strategic goals and agency initiatives, planning the life cycle of federal program spending, including overlapping award periods, clearly defining roles and responsibilities for program and fiscal personnel, identifying program and fiscal personnel in need of training and development, and monitoring progress of federal program management improvements. In summary, improving oversight of grants management and fiscal processes will benefit the state by ensuring access to $57.4 million annually in federal grant funds. We would like to thank NDA management and staff for their time and input throughout the audit. We would be happy to answer any questions the committee may have at this time.
Thank you. If we can hear from the agency, and then we'll, do you want to respond, Director?
Thank you, Governor, and members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Ott. I'm the Director for the Department of Agriculture. I just wanted to thank the Audit Committee for their work. It was a busy time at the time. We have a lot of work to do at the department regarding fiscal activities. We do have paper processes. We have tracking on several different spreadsheets, and formally had not the best operational structure in the fiscal division, but that we are well on our way of change. We hired Ms. Jameson in November, who has the skill set to tackle these problems, and we had been really looking for the right person to do that, and I believe Ms. Jameson is to do that. We have already created a new structure in our fiscal area, and we are on our way to automating a lot of the record-keeping issues. So I just want to be clear that the funding that USDA provides us, we do spend those dollars in the way allotted to us by USDA. And so Nevadans are being served. They are getting their allocation from USDA. But we were just not able to communicate that to the audit committee because of the record processes. So I wanted to thank the audit committee for working with us on that.
Okay, so if I can understand better, what I'm hearing is that it's taking 2 years to spend 1 year's worth of grants. Are we just rolling it all ahead? Are we returning grant money? What are we doing?
Jennifer Ott, for the record. So the way that the bulk of the funding is through the National School Lunch and National School Breakfast programs. That is the bulk of the funding that is under the Child Nutrition Cluster for this audit. The funding cycle for this program is October 1st through September 30th. We have then 60 days after the grant to accept the meal claims. So schools and other agencies cannot actually claim the funds until after the month is complete. So even though the grant cycle ends September 30th, they have 60 days until, so basically to the end of November, to be able to claim those funds. The way that the audit was structured ended at September 30th, so we didn't account for that additional 60 days where that money was then reimbursed to the schools.
Okay.
And that was our fault. I just want to be clear. That was our fault in not being able to provide the accurate records to the audit committee.
So we're not returning it to the federal government unspent?
Jennifer Ott, for the record, not because of any mistakes. For this pot of funding, we're only allowed to reimburse for meals served. So if there's a child that is not eating a meal, that money isn't used for something else. So every year, some funds are returned, but it's only because there had not been a meal served.
Okay. Can this be spent on some of our, with our tribal communities, our indigenous partners?
Jennifer Ott, for the record, no, that's actually a different program.
Okay.
That's a FDIPR program.
Okay. Do we have any questions on the Department of Agriculture Grants Management Audit?
Governor?
Governor, this is Barbara Zagaski.
Go ahead, Secretary.
Thank you. My question is, number one, do you have an educational program? I know that you're supposed to, that goes to the student that helps them make better choices, not only at school, but at the store if they get a chance to go. That's my first question. My second question is, I still don't understand the cash shortfall of $404,000. That's a lot of money, and that there was no way to incur that money back or to find out what happened to it, and then a $1.1 million accounting error. Could you just explain those? Those are a little strange for me. I know you've tried and have said a few things in your introduction, but if you could go back onto that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you, Secretary of State. This is Jennifer Ott, Director of the Department of Agriculture. So in regard to the education portion, yes, those are requirements under those USDA funds that we assist the distributing agency with education component in receiving food. So that could be prior to the pandemic, that was classes or presentations at schools or work with families one-on-one or in groups. And so depending on the audience, that education portion came in many different facets. When it's referencing the $404,000, that was a long-standing issue at the department that had rolled over for many, many budget cycles. It was an accounting problem that it was just kicking the can down the road in every single budget cycle. When I came into the department, rather than kicking the can down the road, we engaged an audit firm to research that and come to a conclusion so that we could solve that problem. Unfortunately, the audit firm was not able to come to a conclusion, but because we had performed the audit, we were able to square that up through this budget process. We have suspicions.
Can I ask you a question on that? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, finish.
No, please.
No, I was just going to ask you if you found out what year it was that the money was lost, and if you have any, and I think you were about to say you have your suspicions.
Jennifer Ott, for the record, I apologize, I didn't get the second portion of that, but I don't have the year. I can provide that to you, but it's been several budget cycles.
I think she said you have your suspicions on what happened to the money.
I do have.
I'm not putting words in her mouth, but I think that's what I heard.
Jennifer Ott, for the record, I do have my unofficial suspicions. These programs used to lie within a different department, and when the decision was made to transfer the programs from that department to the Department of Agriculture, I believe that an accounting error was the reason behind these funds, but we have no way to confirm that. That's just based on conversations from employees that have been around for a long time. So.
And thank you, Governor, and thank you, Jennifer. The 1.1 million accounting error is the only one you didn't touch on, and I'd love to know the year, the 404,000, and what department it came from. Thank you.
Jennifer Ott, for the record, absolutely, Secretary of State. I will respond to that, hopefully by the end of the day. For your 1.1 million question, I'm going to refer that over to Administrator Jamison.
Katie Jamison, for the record, Fiscal Administrator of Nevada Department of Agriculture. Secretary, thank you for the question. That 1.1 million, the auditor noted in the audit that was an FY fiscal year 21 error, and we have since researched that and rectified it. It was a data entry error, and it has since been corrected. And further, we have, due to that and our discovery in that, we have changed the staff who will be handling these to more align them with a professional level, and also add 3 points of reconciliation to that process to prevent anything of that nature in the future. Thank you.
And thank you for that, Ms. Jameson. Can you tell me in that how long it had been there, the 1.1 million, and was it money that was being spent, was being used? Did you have to replace it with something else? If you could answer that, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, Katie Jamison, for the record. The 1.1 was a job number that was put on it wrong, inaccurately. It was a data entry. They should have, it literally is an alpha. They should have not put an A, and they did. And so that just had to be changed. It didn't have any monetary impact or value. It didn't change money or change anything with the draw process or anything of the funds that we had already drawn. It was just simply a clerical error that had to be changed and reversed to fix that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Secretary Director, or Member DeLong. Go ahead.
For the record, Trudy DeLong, public member of the committee. I just, a lot of thoughts going through my head. For my job, I handle federal grants all the time. I'm the federal, the finance director for a nonprofit. And so my initial concern, have the feds come in and done any work? Because I live in fear of them coming in and demanding money back if things like this are uncovered. So has there been any? Please.
Thank you so much for your question. Thank you, Governor, and thank you, Ms. DeLong. Jennifer Ott, for the record. We're in very good standing with USDA. Our failure is providing the proper information to the audit committee. And so that is part of the paper process and the tracking process. We have a spreadsheet that tracks these federal awards to USDA. Like I said, we are in good standing to them. What we failed is pulling the numerous different spreadsheets that are covering all of the different programs and providing them in a proper format for the audit committee. So we are in good standing with USDA, and in fact, in working with them in expanding our food and nutrition programs for the state.
Okay, that's great to hear. So if I understand the $404,000 cash shortfall, was that simply funds that were not drawn down or were, and then not supported by expenditures? Is that what you think? Or, or was it actually money that you received and then couldn't support by proper invoices or whatnot?
So Jennifer Ott, for the record, and it's unclear. It's an expense that had a placeholder in our budget that kept rolling over and was really not reconciled. And so it was, again, rather than kicking it over to additional years for funding, we brought in the auditors to solve it, and unfortunately, they couldn't find a solution.
Okay. And I'm glad to see you've been hired. And just to let you know, there's all kinds of training available from the feds, free, that is great as far as fiscally handling the grants. And last thing, during COVID, it was not unusual not to spend the money down. We have so much being carried forward just because you couldn't do the activities, but I'm glad to hear all the services were provided that were intended to by the grants, so thank you.
Thank you much. And Warren, if I could ask of you or staff, is there an agreement that there was just a communication issue between the agency and you in terms of, I don't want to put you on the spot, are you disputing that? Are you understanding that that is what happened?
Heather Domenici, for the record. Thank you, committee members. So to answer your question, my data came directly from DON, which is the financial data reporting system for Advantage, the financial system for the state. And what I looked at was spending for the last fiscal year that had carried forward all the way through May 7th of 2021. So there was a significant amount from the Child Nutrition Grant that had not been spent. Now, part of that was because there was another COVID grant that they had received that they needed to spend first. But from prior years, you could see from all the data that it did take a significant amount of time, and transactions that were recorded in the system for the bulk of that particular cluster were recorded about a year following the end of the period of performance or the grant award period.
Well, if you bring it way down to my level so I can understand what you're talking about, because you were way up here and I'm down here, my concern is that I don't want this to get carried forward in 5 or 10 years from now. Somebody's going to look at this audit and go, what in the world were they doing? And they didn't spend the money, and there's $50 million. And is there a way that we could codify some of what's been said and get it attached to this audit so that in the future, if somebody did look back on this, that they will understand what we talked about.
Governor, for the record, Warren Lohman, we can certainly do that through our normal process with the 6-month follow-up when the department will provide us additional information that will hopefully close out these recommendations and what they're doing. The concerning piece to us was as we look back several years, and certainly before the director was on board, there were trends. And the trend, we've outlined it on page 4 of the audit in Exhibit 2, but it shows increasing amounts of award that were not spent timely, which we're concerned about the effect on future awards and calculating those. So there was a trend, sort of spending less and the awards coming down a bit from year to year, and that's what triggered our overall concern in this audit. And then we got down into the weeds on the management of it, and Director Ott has been wonderful and transparent in how we've worked through this. So we think now we're on a good path.
Okay.
And in 6 months, we'll be able to report back to you of that.
That would be great. Thank you very much. Do we have any more questions on this one?
Governor, if I may.
I've got Lieutenant Governor, and then I'll go to the Treasurer. Okay, Zach?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Governor. The one question I had was, so do you have any plans then to upgrade your fiscal system from what it is today?
Spreadsheet,
Paper,
I think is what she said.
pencil, with an eraser.
Jennifer Ott, for the record, yes, we're hoping to do a little bit better than paper and spreadsheets. We are in a strange transitional system right now where we're waiting for the implementation of Smart 21 grant management software to come online. And so investing in an entirely new software package, we're not sure if would be financially prudent with state dollars. So we, in the meantime, have been working with Microsoft Power BI tools, of which we've all seen actually during the pandemic of graphing software. And so we are implementing that in-house and moving much of our paperwork processes virtually. We have realigned our fiscal program, and so that it is now a centralized fiscal. That has happened since December. And so we are making almost weekly improvements on the system. But as far as investing in a software package, I would love to, but I'm not sure if that's the prudent direction that we should take, knowing that Smart 21 is going. Thank you.
Treasurer Conine.
Thank you, Governor. One question and then 2 quick comments. Director Ott, is the delta between the money that we are getting in from the federal government and the money that we're spending based on their expectations of the number of students who would qualify versus the number of students who have actually signed up and receiving benefits? Is that the difference?
Jennifer Ott, for the record, and I love that you're using Delta because that takes me back to my chemistry days. So the funding that we are receiving is based on a formula that's congressionally set, based on the expenditures that had happened in prior years. And so, so yes and no. I mean, there is a formula. They also look at census, they look at unemployment numbers. There's many different factors that go into the funding that is set aside for the state of Nevada. I could go into much more detail about programs and that kind of thing, but I'll hold there.
So I guess let me ask it this way. Do we think there's an opportunity through education, through providing resources to the counties to get additional people signed up for programs like this? Are there students who qualify that are not being served?
Thank you, Jennifer Ott, for the record. So you're hitting into my programs that I was going into. So there is programs offered by USDA called Community Eligibility Provision. And that is a program that the department has been working on for the last 2.5 years. And what that basically does is we work directly either with schools or school districts to obtain eligibility so that every single child within that school gets a free meal no matter what. And so that, over the last 2.5 years, because of the work that my staff has done, has increased exponentially, and we're continuing to do that work. So that does alter the funding formula, but in a positive way, in the fact that every child, no matter their individual circumstances, gets a free meal. Does that?
It does, thank you. And just two statements. One, the opportunity here, right? These dollars are part of that $1 billion that we identified and committed to going after in federal funds on an annualized basis. And the systemic changes, right, are going to be partially supported by the work in AB 445 that Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno passed and then the governor signed, and we're going to be working to implement. So I appreciate this, and I thank you to the audit group for agreeing to kind of bring us in the loop as we're going here so we can look for other opportunities or ways that we can support these efforts through the Every Nevadan Recovery Framework. Second, just to comment as the fiscal person in the room, Director Ott, thanks for picking up the can. It's much easier to keep kicking it.
That was good, Zach. I appreciate that. Thank you. Any further questions on the agricultural grants management audit? None? Okay, moving on to item number 5, presentation of audit 6-month follow-up status reports. Let's start with A, Department of Administration, State Public Works Division, tenant improvements and building maintenance.
Heather Domenici for the record. This is the 6-month follow-up to our Department of Administration, State Public Works Division Buildings and Grounds Section Audit, DIA Report Number 2101, which focused on improving fiscal management of tenant improvements and building maintenance. Representing Public Works is Administrator Ward Patrick. Both recommendations were partially implemented. The first recommendation was for Public Works to define tenant improvement projects and establish policies and procedures to properly manage and estimate expenditures. Public Works reports it has redefined tenant improvement projects and extra services to adequately differentiate them from building maintenance expenditures. Public Works has updated its status report and provided evidence of a written policy and procedure to document the changes, with full implementation anticipated by November 2021. For recommendation 2, to use activity codes to track CAT 13 chargebacks, Public Works reports it tracks chargebacks by agency budget account instead of building number. DIA reviewed chargeback transactions, noting some were not coded to agency budget accounts. Full implementation of the recommendation is dependent upon consistent coding of chargebacks. DIA will follow up to ensure implementation of the new procedure. We thank Public Works for its assistance in preparing our report.
Ward, go ahead. Do we have some comments? Yep.
Thank you, Governor, members of the committee. Thank you, Warren, and the Internal Audit Group. This was an audit that was requested by the State Public Works Division.
You've got to identify yourself for the record.
Ward
we
Patrick.
know who you are, but
Thank you. Ward Patrick, for the record, Administrator, Public Works Division. This audit was recommended and requested by the division. We had some issues where this chargeback item was not being, basically the division was being taken advantage of, and various agencies were kind of forcing us to pay these bills and not reimbursing us. And so as a result of the audit, this has been straightened out. And so then, therefore, funds that are going into this account for the B&G that are intended for normal maintenance are being used for that purpose. And so there was the issue was approximately $300,000, and so now this $300,000 is going to protect all the state-owned buildings, including the Capitol building and the mansion. Thank you.
We appreciate that. Thank you. Do we have any questions from the board on the Department of Administration Public Works Division? Any questions in Las Vegas?
No, sir.
Boy, did you get an easy one. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation. Moving on, the rest of you don't expect a similar treatment. Department of Public Safety, Division of Parole and Probation caseloads.
Heather Domenici for the record. This is the 6-month follow-up to our Department of Public Safety, Division of Parole and Probation caseload ratios audit, DIA report number 2102, which focused on aligning actual and budgeted caseload ratios to improve operational effectiveness. Representing DPS is Deputy Director Sherry Brueggemann, HR Manager Mavis Offo, and PIO Kim Yoko Smith. Representing NPP is Chief Tom Lawson. Both recommendations were partially implemented. NPP reports piloting a program to assign weighted values to supervision types for cases and engaging EATS to develop a database query capable of applying weighted values and generating reports. NPP is awaiting EATS' response regarding completion of programming work. DPS reports it has implemented weekly recruitment meetings, increasing recruiting efforts, and following up with candidates. However, DPS did not provide evidence of a formal written plan to improve retention and recruitment for parole and probation officers, and did not provide detail on efforts to improve retention in its status report. A formal written plan to improve retention and recruitment efforts for parole and probation officers and evidence of implementation will be required in order to fully implement the recommendation. We thank DPS and NPP for their assistance in preparing our report.
Okay. DPS, you ready?
Good afternoon, Governor, members of the panel. This is Tom Lawson, Chief of the Division of Parole and Probation. Since we submitted our 6-month letter, I just wanted to provide an update on the status of the report that we requested EATS to look at. They provided us a quote that was rather cost prohibitive, costing approximately $10,000 to $20,000 for them to generate that report. So we looked at some in-house resources, and for our Otis replacement system, we have an MSA on staff who is doing our data mapping for the migration of that. So we're utilizing her services to assist us in looking at the root database data to see if we're able to configure that report internally. We have another member of our staff who is a management analyst who has some limited programming experience from the private sector. He's been working with the MSA and crystal report experience working with the MSA, as well as one of our operational captains who has the caseload knowledge. So between the 3 of them, we've invested approximately a little over 60 total hours, soft costs since we're already paying them. And they have that report pretty close to finalized. We're reconciling some issues in the numbers where our row column doesn't add up with our column values for different caseload types, but we're noticing that some of those are discrepancies that we're not going to be able to reconcile on a report. For example, if we have an offender who has an active sex offender case and they're on paper for a sex offense currently, but they have an expired previous case in which they're on lifetime supervision for a different sex offense, they're showing up as 2 different entities in that report. And unfortunately, Otis is not sophisticated enough to differentiate between those 2, the active and the inactive case. So we're trying to reconcile that data. The report I looked at this morning, that's showing about a 4% error in a report for just the Carson City field office. So we're very close. We think that we'll have a workable portion of that report to be able to examine those numbers much better. And allow the supervisors, as DIA pointed out, a quick at-a-glance view of evaluating which officers are over or underworked in terms of their caseload values. Thank you.
Okay, so let me ask, so who was charging $10,000 to $20,000 that you thought was too much?
Tom Lawson, for the record, that was the quote we received from EATS to generate the report that we identified that we were trying to have them update.
Okay, and I don't know if that's excessive or not, but when we're dealing with, agencies that we're talking about $2.43 a day to pay inmates, I mean, sometimes these figures have to be put in perspective, and I don't know if that's exorbitant or not. It doesn't seem like from all the things that come across my desk, but, I want to make sure that you get good information, and sometimes, you don't have the in-house skill set to determine best mode of action, I think, but I'll leave that up to you. Do we have any questions for the agency or the audit? Any questions in Southern Nevada?
None here.
None? Nobody? Okay. Well, you got off easy too. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. We'll close that one out. Move on to number C, Department of Corrections, fiscal processes.
Heather Domenici for the record. This is the 6-month follow-up to our Department of Corrections Fiscal Processes .1 audit, DIA Report Number 2103, which focused on improving oversight of fiscal management and accounting practices. Representing NDOC is Director Charles Daniels and members of his management team. All 4 recommendations were partially implemented. NDOC reports working with the Attorney General's Office to evaluate the offender store regulations, implementing internal review measures to improve work program projections, reviewing current practices to ensure compliance with state contracting requirements, and reviewing procedures to expand parameters of paid administrative leave usage and clarifying the proper use of overtime. However, NDOC did not provide detail for implementing the recommended actions of assigning pay location codes to conservation camps and obtaining IOC approval for moving employees and personnel costs between budget accounts. The audit finding was discussed during NDOC's budget hearings during the 2021 legislative session. Legislative staff found 62 employees had been reassigned or were working in facilities other than those from which they are paid. As a result, the legislature issued a letter of intent to NDOC to report to the IFC and the Governor's Finance Office on a semi-annual basis to allow for the analysis of where positions are being reassigned and how NDOC's administrative regulations are being used in conjunction with or to supplement its ability to transfer general fund money between budget accounts. NDOC reports it continues to work on the recommendations. We thank NDOC for its assistance in preparing our report.
Thank you. NDOC, do we have a representative?
Governor Sisolak and committee, this is James Jones, Acting Deputy Director of Support Services. As far as the 4 recommendations go, I agree that we are working on the offender store fund with the AG's office to evaluate and make sure we're in compliance with NRS 209, 221, 7 and 8, and the Administrative Procedures Act. As far as recommendation 3 is partially implemented, all converted NDOC contracts have been processed in accordance with the State Administrative Manual and the Nevada Revised Statutes, ensuring compliance with submittal requirements for review and approval from the Governor's Finance Office and the Board of Examiners. I will turn it over. I believe we have our Chief of Fiscal on the line to discuss recommendation number 2. Ms. Adrienne Monroe.
Good afternoon, Governor and honorable members of the committee. For the record, this is Adrienne Monroe with the Nevada Department of Corrections, Acting Chief of Fiscal Services. For item number 2, I can report that the peer review process has been very successful. Our budget analysts have an opportunity to review each other's methods and calculations in an effort to not only improve the calculations, but reduce the number of work programs. And I am happy to report that in looking at fiscal 20, if you take out the CARES work program, we had 136 work programs in fiscal 20. So in looking at 21, if you take out the CARES and furlough and other work programs that aren't normal, we are currently at 64 with another 18 coming. So that puts us at or around 82 work programs. So I am happy to report that our internally, as well as with our partners at the Governor's Finance Office, it's been very helpful to have them in on the review process and reducing these numbers of work programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Monroe, for your comments. Do we have any questions of either the audit agency or the department, rather, or the Department of Corrections?
Governor, this is Zach.
Go ahead, Treasurer.
Item number 4, I don't think we covered.
This is Governor. This is James Jones, Acting Deputy Director of Support Services. For the record, I'm going to turn it over to our Chief of Human Resources to discuss.
Good afternoon, Governor and extinguished committee members. Christina Leathers, Chief Human Resource Officer, for the record. NDOC continues to address recruiting and retention. We have expanded our efforts to include the wardens and their management team at the institutions, as well as our employee development team. This includes refreshing our flyers and our relationships with the criminal justice programs within Nevada and California. And additionally, we're expanding our advertisements to paid job boards in an effort to increase recruiting. Between the transition from NEETS to the success factor system, we have seen a loss in the number of applicants, and we're hoping to increase those numbers through the use of the job boards and some other paid advertising.
Governor, can I follow up there?
Of course.
So item number 4, I think, was about oversight, right? And policies and procedures that would be used in order to not necessarily avoid overtime, but make sure it was being done properly. Your response sounded more about how we would avoid overtime by hiring additional people. Could you talk a little bit about the policies and procedures adjustments and how those are being made to make sure that there's kind of compliance from a management perspective, not necessarily compliance from if you can't find the people, you can't find the people, but it didn't seem like that was the audit findings.
Christina Leathers for the record. So the challenge that NDOC has is that we don't have enough humans, which results in the additional overtime. And so managing the overtime is really about managing the employees that we have or have available to hire. And that's kind of how, from an HR perspective, I'm looking at it.
And if I could ask the audit committee, did I misread that finding, or?
For the record, Warren Lohman, no, Treasurer, you did not.
I think the takeaway that the treasurer's question has not been adequately answered. So you want to give it another try?
James Jones, for the record. I do know that at the institutions, they've implemented policies to help eliminate overtime by shutdown positions, closing areas down where they can more contain everybody and use the least amount of people possible. They get to a point where there's just not enough people in the institutions that you are going to have to hire overtime. And they have implemented those policies and procedures at the institutions with shutdown positions and items like that into their policy.
Treasurer, you want to follow up?
Thanks, Gov. This Treasurer Conan for the record.
Go ahead.
So it seems like the audit is saying that they're worried about, and I'm worried about, the policies and procedures that you're using when you move people around or when you use overtime, as opposed to the fact that there is overtime. We know we have a staffing problem, but that doesn't appear to be what the audit's getting to. What the audit's getting to is the mechanic in which we fix the staffing problem does not appear to be effective. Maybe, is that helpful?
I guess I do. Okay. Christina Leathers for the record. So thank you, Treasurer. I believe I understand. So one of the things that we've done thus far is in relation to this audit is I prepared a memo to the Governor's Finance Office specifically identifying what positions we wanted to use in what areas in an effort to be forthcoming with the move of the positions versus doing it on the back end. This was a process that I walked into, so I'm still trying to understand how we manage this. And so from the human resources perspective is, if we communicate ahead of time instead of behind, then we could at least start having those discussions on how to address the issue and the policies moving forward versus taking Peter over here to Rob Paul to fix the problem. Does that address the question?
Treasurer Conan, for the record, we're getting closer, but I don't want to take up the entire meeting. Gov, I can follow up offline. I will say that just broadly, and I don't want to speak for my legislative friends, but I think almost everyone would prefer to know about it in advance as opposed to finding out about it in the paper.
Agreed.
Thank you, Governor.
If I could, Mr. Governor?
Certainly. General Ford.
Yeah, so this is for parole and probation as well. I know you guys are between rocks and hard places all the time on this personnel issue, overtime issue. I remember, and as a alumni of the legislature, I know that we have you constrained quite a bit. And you frequently are seeking forgiveness as opposed to permission, which other agencies do as well. So I sympathize, and frankly, as a head of an agency, empathize with you a little bit as well, because you got to get permission from the legislature before you can reallocate these positions. I mean, so I say that to say, I understand the concern. I understand the place that you find yourself in, the difficulty of recruiting, retaining, and I get it. I get it, but we have to do better. And I think one of the ways that we continue to do better is on the budgeting on the front side. So and Governor, I don't mean to step on toes, hope I'm not stepping on toes, but I know the governor has presented budgets to the legislature that reflect what you need. And so at the end of the day, I think that's part of how we start getting in front of all of this. So I'm looking at you like you're the one I need to talk to, but whoever it is that needs to hear it, I think at the end of the day, that's what it boils down to. I can't beat you up. I mean, I know PNP, I know you work hard over there, and I know you probably not be listening, you might be gone already. And corrections, I know you don't have a lot of people. And overtime is, it's a problem. And so on the one hand, I'm not beating you up, but on the second hand, I want to try to help facilitate improved process going forward.
Does anyone need to respond to that, Jennifer Ford?
No, it was a comment.
It was a comment. Great, thank you. Any further questions on this one? Seeing and hearing none, we're going to move on to D, Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, Division of Environmental Protection.
Good afternoon, Governor, members of the committee. Michelle Isherwood on behalf of the Division of Internal Audit. Here representing the Division of Environmental Protection is Administrator Greg Lovato. This is the 6-month follow-up on the Division of Environmental Protection Petroleum Fund, oversight of certified environmental managers. This audit had 4 recommendations. To date, no action has been taken. The second recommendation was to establish rates for professional services. This recommendation was made to standardize rates, prevent rate inflation, and comply with industry best practice. After discussions with the division, we look forward to working with them on implementation of a rate schedule for certified environmental managers. The next 3, that had an implementation date of June 2021. The division has asked for an extension to January of 2022. The next 3 recommendations have an implementation date of January 2022. The first one is recommendation of project costs. This recommendation is to ensure that costs quoted on quotes or NTEPs match costs invoiced. NDEP has indicated that they are discussing available database options to complete this particular recommendation. The third recommendation is to strengthen certified environmental manager requirements and education requirements. This NDEP has indicated that they're in initial discussions to strengthen the program and to explore strengthening requirements. And finally, the fourth recommendation is to perform random verification of proof and payments. This particular recommendation ensures that companies are paying the required co-payment under coverage terms. NDEP has been unable to work on this particular recommendation due to competing priorities. We'd like to thank the division for their continued work on this audit, and we look forward to working with them in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, does the division have any comments they want to make?
Thank you, Governor Sisolak. I don't have any comments right now, but happy to take questions.
Okay, well, then my question would be, before I get a lot of other ones, it doesn't seem like there's been, with due respect, a lot of effort on making any progress on any of these recommendations or to establish the ratios that were requested. And it seems like it's just kind of sat in a vacuum. And that's not acceptable, so.
Understood, Governor Sisolak. Greg Lovato for the record. It has been a busy time the past 6 months.
Okay, and I appreciate that. I'm going to stop you there. Every one of these people have been really busy the last 6 months. We've been overwhelmed, but we can't keep using that as an excuse. So I'll let you go from there. Go ahead.
Understood, Governor Sisolak. Greg Lovato for the record. We have, we think, taken a very hard look at the request to establish a rate schedule. It's the division's review that establishing a rate schedule would not actually result in any cost savings to the fund. The audit team did not agree with that finding. So we are prepared to move ahead and look at adopting rate schedules that have been looked at in other states. We still think that's going to require additional review to determine what benefit would actually, that would benefit to the fund in terms of cost savings. We presented some detailed findings on that, and but we're prepared to move forward and look at what other states are doing. In regard to the other 3 recommendations, we are prepared to complete those by the date of January 2022.
Okay, that's at least a firm date. I appreciate that. That's good. Okay, do we have any more questions from any of the board members?
Governor.
Yes, go ahead, Treasurer Conine.
Thank you. I'm not sure if Secretary Sagaski is still on the line, and I don't want to steal her thunder, but I know okay, great. So you're going to ask a question, I'm sure, about site visits, and I'll leave you to it. But from an end down.
Go ahead.
Okay, so on behalf of the Secretary and I, every time you're in front of this group, we ask about site visits, right? Are we going to locations to see if the money that is being spent on things like remediation is actually happening? And I was just curious first if those site visits had commenced.
Thank you, Treasurer Conine. For the record, this is Greg Lovato. The site visits have not commenced, although we have set up a policy through the board for all equipment oversight, equipment maintenance, and equipment sale that was passed by the Board Review Claims in September 2020. That does set us up to start performing site visits. I will remark that we did seek additional staffing to complete these site visits in the last biennial budget. That was not granted, so we are going to try to do what we can with the staff we have.
Great, thank you. And from a timing perspective, when should we assume those are going to start?
Thank you, Treasurer Conine. I will have to get back to you on that after consulting with staff, but they will start this year.
Great, thank you. Governor, can I have another?
Go ahead, and before you do, I just want to, I don't want to pile on here, but I mean, we haven't started the site visits, but we're going to get to them. Is the same kind of thing I'm getting with implementing. Maybe some folks aren't understanding the urgency of some of these recommendations or comments that are made coming out of the committee. It's important that the department, the agency understand that these are actions that we need and want to be taken, and I think they need to be maybe prioritized a little higher.
Thank you, Governor Sisolak. We understand.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Treasurer Conine.
Thank you, Governor. And this is for the auditors. On recommendation number 2, the department just mentioned looking at other states. I'm curious, have you already looked at other states with regards to setting up fees for CEM costs?
Who are you asking to call? Oh, go ahead.
Yep. Michelle Isherwood for the record. Yes, the audit originally looked at 3 other states, California, Colorado, and Utah. Both California and Colorado have already implemented rate schedules for certified environmental managers or the like, and Utah is in the process of implementing. They've been working on it for, I believe, almost 2 years. So they should be implementing theirs in the next several months.
Great, thank you. And one final question, again, not trying to pile on, but piling on. On recommendation number 3, strengthening CEM certification requirements, I'll remind everyone that we had a previous audit that looked at some CEMs who actually had conducted fraud, right? And then came back and were rehired by the department to continue doing the work. So I would just like to state that these certifications probably should be looked at on a relatively frequent basis so as to make sure that we're getting what we paid for. Thanks, Governor.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? And can the record reflect that Lieutenant Governor Marshall had to leave? She had a previous commitment of the meeting she had to get to. Moving on to, thank you very much, Mr. Lovato. Moving on to item.
Governor, is it okay if I thank the treasurer for asking my questions? Thank you.
You sure can. Thank you. Did you have any other questions, Secretary?
No, the treasurer got them for me. Thank you.
He got it for you. He's on top of it today. 6E, Department of Administration and Governor's Finance Office, Board of Pharmacy, deferred compensation.
Michelle Isherwood for the record. Here representing the Deferred Compensation Program is Executive Officer Rob Bamer, and here representing the Board of Pharmacy is Executive Secretary Dave Wiest and Counsel Brett Kant. This is our 6-month follow-up on the Department of Administration, Deferred Comp, Governor's Finance Office, and Board of Pharmacy's Deferred Compensation Match, audit number 2105. This audit was conducted to clarify the deferred compensation statutes necessary to guide agency decisions. There were 2 recommendations. Recommendation number 2 has been fully implemented. That recommendation asked the Governor's Finance Office to refer the facts to the Office of Attorney General to determine whether open meeting laws were violated by the Board of Pharmacy on the deferred compensation match decision. The facts were referred to the Attorney General's office on February 11th, 2021, and we're awaiting a response. Recommendation number 1 was to propose legislation clarifying state agency matching contributions to employees' deferred compensation accounts. The Nevada Deferred Compensation Plan has reviewed and discussed the recommendation. The committee has reviewed the recommendation, and they are discussing options. They are considering whether a change to NAC or statute would be appropriate. Any future legislative changes would be prepared for this 82nd legislative session in 2023. Thank you. We'd like to thank the agencies involved for their continued cooperation, and we look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you. Would the agency like to make any comments, or?
Thank you, Governor and members of the committee. I think Michelle has expressed everything that we are doing. I just want to say that we're making an attempt to really accomplish the recommendation through a change in regulation. We're hoping that we can satisfy that. I'm working with the Attorney General's office, our Deputy Attorney General, Hina Rasul, to kind of go through that. If we get to the point where we need to develop a statute change or recommend a statute change, by all means, we'll be prepared for in 2023 for that next session.
Great. And if you could just get to identify yourself for the
I apologize, sir.
Sorry.
For the record, the last comment was from Rob Beamer, the Executive Officer of the Public Employees Deferred Compensation Program.
Great. So put that last comment before the previous comment, and then we'll have it all straight so everybody will understand when they review this.
I like your style.
Thank you. Do we have any questions on this audit?
I do, Governor. This is Barbara Sagaski.
Secretary Sagaski, floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm concerned about this one, and I know we're waiting for an opinion from the Attorney General, which is fine, but I am very concerned that we have one of the only boards that I guess you'd call it double dipping, that they have 2 contributions coming to them, the deferred compensation and then the PERS contribution. So I am very concerned about this and how, number one, how it looks, but we've had our problems with the dental board through the years, and I just hope we get this settled faster, sooner than later type thing. So that's all I'm saying, Governor. Thank you.
I appreciate your comment, Secretary, and the Attorney General is sitting eagerly on the edge of his chair there, knowing that we're looking for a decision. I know he's probably going back to his office to make a phone call as soon as this meeting's over. Do we have any comments from down south?
Yeah, Mr. Governor, funny you would say that. Yeah, I'm absolutely trying to figure out where we are on that. I know it's been assigned. We don't have an opinion yet, but I can ensure you that in short order, we will have a response.
I knew you'd be on top of this. I just knew it. No doubt in my mind. Do we have any further questions on this audit? No. Thank you very much. Off the hook. Moving on to item number 6, presentation of special follow-up status reports. Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Public and Behavioral Health, Ross and Neal, doctor attendance. Boy, we've heard this a lot, so.
For the record, Ashwini Prasad. Representing the Division of Public and Behavioral Health is Administrator Lisa Sherrick. In Las Vegas, Deputy Administrator Joanne Millay and Hospital Administrator Susan Lynch. This is our 13th report on doctor attendance at Ross and Neal Hospital. The past 4 years, our review shows division has consistently accounted for doctor work hours, although a large number of hours for some doctors are performed off-site away from the hospital. To account for doctor work hours, the division reconciles approved time off-site from the hospital with recorded electronic medical record entries, authorized and documented meetings, trainings, and other events. In October 2019, the division created policies and procedures for how doctors are approved for off-site work hours and for what purposes. During the most recent review period of fiscal year 2020, we found overall, on average, hospital doctors are working 40% of their compensated hours away from the hospital. We also noted select doctors were working from 45 to 76% of their compensated time off-site from the hospital. We found use of the off-site hours by doctors approved for off-site work was 6% lower for the rapid stabilization unit and 9% higher for the inpatient hospital compared to our last review period. In addition, we found use of off-site hours by doctors approved for off-site work increased by 21% during the fiscal year 2020 review period. The result is the average number of hours doctors approved for off-site work hours are on-site for patient care in the hospital for 5 hours and 27 minutes during a 10-hour workday. We also found in many weeks there were more hours accounted for on division reports than claimed on timesheets by contract doctors who worked off-site. Neither the affected doctors nor the division attempted to adjust compensation based on the variance between the reports and timesheets. To note, 3 contract doctors were consistently compensated for 50 or more work hours in a week during the review period. These doctors also recorded the most approved off-site hours. The division should continue successful accountability efforts to ensure doctors work a full day, timesheets are accurate, and off-site hours are reviewed and approved. I want to thank the division for its assistance throughout our reviews and thank them for their time. This concludes my overview of the Ross and Neal Hospital Doctor Attendance Special Follow-Up.
Do we have any comments from the agency regarding Ross and Neal?
Lisa Sherrick, Administrator for the Division of Public and Behavioral Health. I would just like to say we appreciate the recommendation and fully support it. This has been many, many years, and I think it has been a wonderful process for us to continue to ensure that we have this information and holding the doctors accountable for the services that they provide. So thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if we have any questions from any board members, but I'm going to make a suggestion here, and I agree wholeheartedly with the recommendation that you follow up and continue to track doctors and their hours and where they're being performed. But I think we've come to a time after 13 reports that maybe we need to remove the required 14th and 15th and subsequent reports on this. The agency Division of Internal Audits is doing a lot of different auditing, and I just don't know if this is the best use of ongoing time. So unless someone vehemently is opposed, I'd like to move that maybe we eliminate that, if there's any discussion.
Yes, this is Barbara Sagowski.
Yes, go ahead, Secretary.
Thank you, Governor. The speaker was correct. This has been going on since I was in the legislature, this whole thing, this whole program. So I don't know if there's still an issue, but I think somebody needs to hold their feet to the fire, so to speak, at Ross and Neal, that we need to continue this, and whether it's their supervisors or whoever, but I do think at least the legislature needs a report on a regular basis. That would be fine, but this is just one of those things that we're still concerned about, and it just hasn't gone away because I don't think the accountability is there. So however you want to handle it, I'll support you, but I do think that it is an issue, and it keeps rearing its ugly head for us in all of our committees. It doesn't matter what it is, but it's always there.
Right, and I appreciate your comment, Secretary, and I do agree it was an issue. I don't know if it's as much of an issue anymore from what I'm hearing about the follow-up that's occurring, whether it's at the supervisory level or the agency level, I don't know. I just don't know if it's in the best use of the division's labor to continue to follow up.
I don't, yeah, and I don't disagree with you there, Governor, but I am concerned and think that it still needs, I mean, it's something that we need to continue to look at, and it's one of those things we still have an issue with. So it doesn't go away, but I do understand. I think that Administrator Lohman and his staff do a wonderful job in these audits. I think they're fantastic, so I don't disagree with you.
Thank you. Do we have any further comments from the South on that?
Governor, just real briefly.
Please.
Thank you. I don't think there's more to be gained by additional audits here. I think that it sounds like the division, and I guess I'll ask this as a question. Is the division committed to continuing to capture this information and provide it to us as we might ask for it, even if it's not through the formal audit process?
Lisa Sherrick, Administrator, absolutely. For people that don't know, I used to work at internal audits, and I used to be in quality assurance for many, many years, so this is very important to me, that anytime you have an issue, you need to ensure that you have implementation processes for sustainment, so absolutely.
Then, Governor, I'd be okay turning it back over to the agency and freeing up the EBAC's time.
Okay, that would be, is that in the form of a motion?
Sure.
Right. We have a motion on the floor to discontinue the every meeting audit, special follow-up audits. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing seeing none, all in favor, did you have a comment?
I did. I'm sorry. I just wondered if you would be amenable to tabling this for next meeting, because frankly, I would like to just check with my DAGs who work with Ross and Neil to see if this audit helps us in advising on circumstances that arise. I don't feel comfortable having a vote right now.
Sure. We'll table, are these done annually or twice a year?
Warren Lohman for the record. We've been doing them annually. We will be presenting our audit plan at the next meeting, and we will not include it on that plan until the general gets back to us with what he'd like.
Okay. Is that good with you, General Ford? Do you want to get back to Director Lohman personally, and then we can decide if it's going to be included in the schedule?
Yeah, that's fine. I was just suggesting that the vote on whether to proceed, we would put to the next agenda.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm happy to talk offline and then make that recommendation.
Okay, we'll table the vote till the next meeting and then just bring that back to me at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Sure. Do we have any further discussion on this one? Seeing and hearing none, let's move on to item number 7, review of the annual audit plan pursuant to NRS 353A.038.
Thank you, Governor. For the record, Warren Lohman. The tab 7 shows you the current audits as they are planned. I would say we're very solid through the tentative February 22 Executive Branch Audit Committee meeting. We will come back to you at the next meeting in October with our new audit plan for fiscal year 22, and we have some audits that we know will be including on that. Any requests that you have, Governor, your office will be happy to put on there. We'll do our risk assessment as we always do and get the committee's formal approval of that plan. But as you know, the plan can be adjusted based on the committee's desires throughout the year.
Right. And let's go ahead with that. If anybody has any changes they'd like to make to the plan, please, you can speak now or get a hold of the director and we can go from there. How's that?
We're good.
We're good? Okay. That's the end of number 7. Moving on to item number 8, committee members' comments. Do we have any comments from committee members? Hearing seeing none. Item number 9, public comment. This is the second time set aside for public comment. Any member of the public wishing to comment, please step forward, identify yourself for the record, and comments will be limited to 3 minutes. I will start in Carson City. Do any of these individuals, anxious folks in the audience wish to make a public comment? You can just form a line right over here by the chairs. Seeing no one, and I see people leaving in Las Vegas. Do we have anyone in Las Vegas wishing to make a public comment?
No one here, sir.
And we don't have any written public comment or anybody on the phone?
No, Governor, we don't.
We have no one. We close public comment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion on the floor to adjourn. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. It was nice
Thanks.
to be back
Thanks,
in
Gov.
person again. Thank you.